Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the DRC webinar for Albion Basin Summer Use Project, presented by Professor Harris, Sondak, and McKenzie Rees. McKenzie Rees is a PhD candidate at the University of Utah, completing her degree in organizational behavior. Her research focuses on areas related to ethical decision-making. Professor Sondak is a Daniels Professor of Ethics and Professor of Management at the David Eccles School of Business. His research investigates the psychology of allocation decisions, including two-party and multi-party negotiations and market context, group processes, and decisions in procedural justice and ethics. Please help me welcome McKenzie Rees and Harris Sondak.
Thanks so much, Stephanie. I'm really excited to be here today and glad that Harris could join me in presenting our exercise, the Albion Basin Summer Use Project. This has been a great experience to put together, not only because Harris and I really felt like it allows for more complex and advanced negotiations and learning experiences to occur, but also we had the opportunity to create this project. We actually interviewed all of the parties that are interested in that I'll talk about a little bit later in this negotiation. This negotiation is actually ongoing right now and continues to remain an issue and a conflict in the Albion Basin area in Utah. So it's been fun to see students learn from some of the unique parts of this negotiation, but also to see how the negotiation is unfolding with Harris involved in the actual negotiation. He's been able to take some of the ideas that have been discussed in different classes and make recommendations to the parties that are actually involved. So I'm appreciative of all of his work to as part of this exercise, and also of all the people who let us interview them. Even though they're experiencing a lot of conflict among their group, they actually were very cooperative in sharing their opinions and thoughts about how the conflict could be resolved and what could be done to improve the area. So it's a fun negotiation to be part of. So I'm excited to be presenting this to you and hope that you'll find it as an exercise that can be useful in your negotiations classes. We've also had people use this in classes related to power, as well as teams-related classes, and hopefully you'll see some of the places where those applications and learning experiences can come from in those various classes. So just as an overview, we're going to begin helping you understand a little bit more about the actual Albion Basin negotiation that's occurring and the conflict that's occurring over the Albion Basin, and particularly one road, the main road that goes through the Albion Basin. Harris is going to give us a little bit of background on that because he's actually a town councilman in Alta, which is the town in which the Albion Basin is located. So he'll start us off with that. Then we'll go into the actual exercise. I'll give an overview of the structure of the Albion Basin exercise. It's a two-part exercise, so we'll talk about the overview of the exercise, talk about the roles so that you understand each role that is included in the exercise. There's a total of 7 roles, but you can also use this exercise as a 5-role exercise or a 6-role exercise. And then we'll talk about the particular logistics of the exercise at each stage. So there's a within-group negotiation, and then there's a cross-group negotiation, which is a more traditional multi-party negotiation that you would think of. Hopefully we have time, but I just want to highlight some of the debriefing opportunities that you can discuss across these 2 stages of the negotiation, and then we'll wrap it up with questions. So Harris, if you want to give us an overview of what's going on in the Albion Basin, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, McKenzie, and good morning to everyone. It's fun to see in the participant list a number of old friends, so hello. As McKenzie said, I am a resident of the town of Alta, which is located 10 miles east of Sandy, Utah, which is next to Salt Lake City in the valley. And Alta is at the upper end of the Little Cottonwood Canyon, where Albion Basin is located. I am a town elected official of the town, a town council member. The Albion Basin is not a very big area, but it's an important area for our community because one, it's about half of the Alta ski area is located in the basin. And a large portion of the water used in Salt Lake City and Salt Lake Valley comes out of this area. We get a lot of snow up here. There's an average of 500 inches of snowfall per year. And the road that is in question is only open a few months in the summertime because there's so much snowfall. The pictures you see on the slide that McKenzie posted show basically the same part of Albion Basin in the winter and in the summer. In the winter, we get ski area business, and in the summer, we get people coming up out of the valley to hike and picnic and just get out of the heat of the valley, where a typical July day will be in the high 90s or maybe even 100, and it's almost never hotter than 75 or 80 degrees up here. There are some traditional inholdings from the old mining days, and so there are some residences in the Albion Basin. The lower part of the basin is served by town services, water and sewer, and the road in the summertime, and the upper areas don't have any town services. The people are on wells, and there's only a handful of residents up there. There's also a United States Forest Service campground. The land ownership is all USFS. There is a contract to the ski area so that they can operate in the wintertime, and they also have stewardship and maintenance responsibilities in the summer. The relationships amongst the residents themselves are not all that smooth. The upper basin residents and the lower basin residents have somewhat different interests, although we collapse across them in the role of residents in our exercise. And the area is not only fragile, but the population of the Salt Lake Valley, which is now something greater than 1.5 million, I think, is expected to be more than 2.5 million within 25 more years. It's one of the fastest growing areas in the United States. So we have quite a bit of there are quite a bit of issues about the access for recreation purposes, as well as the maintenance of the water, plus the recreation in the wintertime. We have overused trails, and one of the goals in the Albion Basin, and one of the goals of the United States Forest Service, as you'll see, is to disperse our residents. We tried to capture in the exercise some of these real issues. Amongst them, that even if the town of Alta had the money to provide shuttle service to all those who demand shuttle service, if we were to close the road, which you'll see we actually can't do in the short run, we are not sure that that's the right thing to do, because we think that having a bottleneck and some unhappy visitors as a result may be the best way to preserve some of this area. So the issues, the area, this exercise maps onto a real land use problem that's continuing. Should we go to the next slide, McKenzie? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So in the summertime, the road that you see a picture of here is open. In the wintertime, it's full of snow, and it does not get plowed. And the residences are served by people with snowmobiles and their own private snowcats. For those of you who are familiar with that, they're a kind of tractor with a cabin that can transport people and goods up to the residences, but they have no other vehicle access. It's an unpaved road that gets quite a bit of traffic. A typical busy July Saturday will show on the meters that we've put on the road something between 700 and 800 cars during approximately a 12-hour period, which, if you do the division, comes to being something like 1 car per minute. Plus, as I said, the area was getting degraded. All of the water is owned by the Salt Lake City Public Utilities, and in the arid desert, in the arid West, water is the critical resource. And the debate is who's going to have access on this road and when and by what means. That's really what this negotiation is about. The product of the negotiation is a decision about how to use the road. Currently, the road is open to all. The town of Alta, which is the jurisdiction for the community, and the United States Forest Service, which is the owner of most of the land and all of the land under the road, we do not have the right to simply close the road at our discretion. We can do that for purposes of public safety, say if there was a fire or if it's so crowded up there that we think that, which occasionally happens, like on July 4th weekend, we will say no more cars allowed, but that's by order of our town police. We call them the marshals. For the Forest Service to close the road would require a public scoping process. It will probably take about a year and a half to get all the public input. One of the outcomes in the negotiation exercise that occasionally happens is that the Forest Service agrees to close the road, even though their materials tell them that they don't immediately have the right to do that. You will notice at the upper end of the road, which is in yellow on this map, that there is a campground, an Albion Basin campground. That's a United States Forest Service campground, and people can reserve spaces in there and use the road to access the campground. You can also see on this map the staging area in orange, which is where we have a parking lot and the shuttles start from. And you can see the ski area, ski lifts. In the middle of the map, and those dense contour lines represent a division between the west side of the ski area and the east side of the ski area. The east side of the ski area is the Albion Basin, and you can see where the ski lifts are designated by those double blue lines. The road is around 3 miles long. There are some designated parking spots. People creatively park wherever they want to. Occasionally, and we have increased our enforcement as part of the real situation.
Great, thanks, Harris. So just if you're thinking about teaching this exercise, and just let me add, if you have any questions as we move forward, feel free to ask, to type a question in the box, and I'll be happy to ask it, or if it's more appropriate for our resident expert of the Albion Basin to answer it, I'm sure Harris would be happy to answer those as well as we move forward. Sometimes it's hard for Harris and I to conceptualize what it's like to not teach this knowing this area so well, and Harris knows it much better than I do. But I grew up in Utah, and I've visited the area many times. But we've found, as we've had people teach this exercise who aren't familiar with the area, that this map actually is a very helpful tool in helping students understand exactly what their negotiation is over. So let me just quickly orient you to this map and what you can point out that might help students in the negotiation. First of all, as Harris mentioned, the yellow area is the road that's being negotiated over. The orange circle that you see in kind of the upper left area is where the gate is. And Harris mentioned that the town of Alta has provided some shuttles to shuttle people back and forth on this road. That's where people can get on and off the shuttle. And the purple areas that you see are actual parking lots. So one thing that's important to note here, and that's a big issue in terms of the preservation, is that because of the overuse of the area, a lot of people are parking on the road. The problem with that is that they actually park on the very, vegetation and things that several of the parties involved in the negotiation are trying to preserve. You can see that there's a lot more purple below the gate and the road than up along the road. So there's kind of the biggest parking areas are right up by the campground and then just about a mile away from there. Uh, so this is one of the major problems, and what the shuttle is trying to do is encourage more people to park in the larger parking lots and take the shuttle from there. This also helps. Sorry, go ahead,
I
Harris.
just want to add, just to get a scope of the scarcity. There's something like 57 parking spaces past the gate, and you can imagine with 1,000 cars or 800 cars a day going up there that there's quite a bit of conflict about how to manage the parking situation.
Yeah, thank you. So this is also a good time to note before we get into the details and structure of the exercise. One of the things that Harris and I incorporated into this, and one reason we feel like it's an exercise that you'd want to administer, in more advanced portions of your negotiations class, or even to an advanced, in an advanced negotiations seminar or workshop, is we've actually provided a link in all of the negotiations roles that links to a website we've created that has a public uh, research document that the United States Forest Service put together a couple of years ago, which actually outlines the problems that face the Albion Basin. So the usage issues that Harris mentioned, as well as the limited parking, the limited access, the road conditions, and things like that. Additionally, the great thing about this document is that it proposes 3 or 4 different solutions to the overusage problem that's going on right now. Now, in the past, we have not explicitly told students that that document is available for them to use. Some other faculty who have used this exercise in their class have made it explicit that they want their students to use that additional document. But we found that for students that choose to look at that document and use it as kind of a starting point, they tend to reach much more integrative agreements, and they reach those faster than students who don't take the time to look over this additional document. So we're trying to not only mirror a real world case that's going on right now, we're also trying to mirror the process of an actual negotiation. So students don't have all the information contained in their roles. They actually benefits them to go out and do this additional research and think about some of the solutions before they actually get into the negotiation. So I just wanted to mention that it's a unique aspect of this negotiation exercise, and it's helpful to know that it's available to the students as they attempt to negotiate. So okay, so let's move on with the actual negotiation now that you have a little bit of background about the exercise. And just one more thing to note, Harris has actually written a great summary of what's occurring with the negotiation, with the actual negotiation that's part of the teaching packet through the DRRC. So the structure of the exercise, there's a lot of issues going on related to preservation, as Harris mentioned. However, we really kind of compacted all of those issues into a single issue of, who gets access to the road, how much access do they get, when do they get it, is there alternative forms of access? You can boil it down to something as simple as should we open or close the road, but as Harris mentioned, closing the road is not a feasible option within this negotiation, and it's more of a long-term solution in the actual negotiation. And so really the questions come down to issues related to this road. The negotiation is a 7-role, 2-part exercise, and I'll explain the roles in just a moment. The 2 parts of the exercise are within group negotiation, in which all the members assigned to the same role in the exercise will negotiate together as to what the important issues are to that particular role, and what the preferences are within each issue that the role prioritizes. The second stage of the negotiation is an across groups negotiation, in which this is more of your traditional multi-party negotiation, in which each person is assigned, there's one role one person representing each role assigned to the group, and then they negotiate, what the outcome they would like to see is related to the road. There's a couple of deliverables that you can have your students turn in related to this negotiation. First of all, they're actually going to quantify their preferences through a scoring rubric that they create in the within group negotiation. So that's the kind of deliverable that students can turn in after they negotiate within their groups. Additionally, after the stage 2 negotiation, students can turn in a detailed outcome of their negotiation. And because of that scoring rubric, each negotiator can actually score or quantify the negotiation and how it reflects their preferences in each issue that they came up with. As I mentioned, this is more appropriate for an advanced negotiation. And I think what students really need to know to have the scoring rubric and the multi-party negotiation be a meaningful learning experience is, they need to know the basics of their BATNA, reservation points, and then they need to see a negotiation in which they maybe are provided some kind of scoring rubric to know how to value their preferences. So we often use the scoring rubric created with new recruit as an example of what the deliverable might be for them moving forward. So there's 7 negotiator roles, and I just wanted to quickly familiarize you with each of these 7 roles because they actually play a big part in some of the key debriefing opportunities that I'll talk about a little bit later on. First of all, the U.S. Forest Service is kind of the role that will kick off the negotiation. So the U.S. Forest Service, as Harris mentions, owns most of the land or has jurisdiction over the land in the Albion Basin. However, they're facing, like a lot of government agencies, strict budget restrictions. And when we interviewed them, they said, we'd really like to do a lot of things that would improve the infrastructure in the area. We just can't afford to do it. Let me give you some examples. The Alta ski lifts, which is another role, basically maintains the entire Albion Basin free of charge for the U.S. Forest Service. Now they hold the special use permit so that they can run the ski company, but in the summer they don't have any formal obligation to maintain the area. They do to maintain a good relationship with the Forest Service. However, the Forest Service doesn't pay the Alta ski lifts company anything for those services. Additionally, the town of Alta has actually solicited money from state funding to resurface the Albion Basin Road every year. So the Forest Service actually does little to no maintenance on that road. And the town of Alta also has their marshals patrol the road. So the marshals give out parking tickets. They ensure that people aren't going too fast. They marshal the surrounding area out, off of the road as well. And this takes up about the 25% of the marshal's time. So the Forest Service really isn't putting a lot of money into the area on an annual basis. They're relying on other people. Because of that, there can be some interesting power dynamics in the negotiation. They're very interested in ensuring preservation of the area, mostly so that people can actually come and use and enjoy the area. But they, of course, want to keep the costs low because they really can't afford anything at this time. At the end of the negotiation, the U.S. Forest Service is explicitly told that they can't close the road. And if negotiation outcomes from certain groups come back and say, we chose to close the road, this actually makes an interesting debriefing point because the Forest Service is told explicitly that they cannot do this, and because they're the ones that will make the initial proposal in the negotiation, they really tend to be the ones that everyone looks to for a final say in terms of the outcome that's reached. So Alta ski lifts is the second role that's in the negotiation. Alta ski lifts has, as I mentioned, the special use permit for Albion Basin, and they are really interested in keeping the U.S. Forest Service happy because they know that permit's renewed every couple of years. and they know that the Forest Service could choose to change that any year that they wanted to. So even though that would be a huge undertaking, that's still a possibility. So because of that, the Alta Ski Lifts, as I mentioned, takes care of the area year-round, even in the summer when there's no formal agreement that they need to do that. Alta Ski Lifts also owns a lot of the surrounding property and restaurants in the area. They own some hotels and things, so they're really by far the largest company in the area. And they have a lot of say in what goes on in the town of Alta and also in the Albion Basin. Up until just this last summer, all of the restaurants in the Alta owned were only open in the winter because there's a lot of people that come skiing and then stay for lunch or dinner or something in the summer. There are a lot of people using the area for hiking and photography and things like that, but it's not as consistent or predictable of a schedule as in the winter. So until just last summer, the restaurants were only open in the winter, and as it's framed in the negotiation, Alta Ski Lifts does not have any restaurants open, but that could be an opportunity for them in the future if they choose to use that as a negotiating, a bargaining tool in their negotiation. Because they do so much to maintain the area, they easily get frustrated by a lot of people being in the Albion Basin hiking and exploring the area. And because of this, people not only use the road to drive their cars up and down, but they also hike on the road. A lot of people bike on the road. So it's very difficult to quickly get up and down the road. So Alta Ski Lifts would prefer that the road be completely closed so that they can work uninterrupted in the area. And there's a few other parties that agree with them on this aspect. The town of Alta is the town that's closest to the Albion Basin, and the Albion Basin is located within the town of Alta. So they have a big interest in making sure that the area is preserved, not only because it's what's right outside their door, but also the people of Alta really feel responsibility to make sure that they're good hosts and good landowners at the same time. So they want to make sure people are enjoying their time in Alta while they're there. The town of Alta actually does a lot to help preserve the area. As I mentioned, they are willing to give up to 25% of their marshal's time to enforce the area. They also solicit state road funds to almost annually repair the road, and they use some of that state funding to pay for shuttle services, combined with a donation from the Friends of Alta, which I'll talk about in just a moment. The town of Alta has the jurisdiction to, increase or cut sales tax, property tax, all kinds of things like that. So they have some power in the negotiation, not only because they can help find a solution to funding, but also because they have the most information out of anyone in the negotiation. So the negotiation role for the town of Alta has very specific details about how much it costs to repave the road every year and how much the shuttle service costs and where the money's coming from. They also know how much tax, how much they're earning in tax dollars in terms of sales tax every year. And so they have a better idea of how much that can be increased or decreased. So typically in the negotiation, town of Alta takes on a leading role just mostly because they can provide the other participants information that no one else has. The interesting thing about this is that oftentimes the town of Alta assumes that everyone else has the same information, which is not the case at all. All of the roles have a general part of the negotiation instructions and then a confidential instructions that vary widely. So they even talk about different issues that are important that no one else is really aware of, which I'll talk about in a moment. The other big power player here is Salt Lake Public Utilities. They basically own the water in the Albion Basin, and this water is one of the major water sources for Salt Lake City. So if this water gets contaminated for any reason, Salt Lake Public Utilities has the ability to shut down the canyon completely and not let anyone go into the area. So Salt Lake Public Utilities, because of the increasing use of Albion Basin, is more and more concerned about the sanitary conditions of the area every year. When we talked to them, one of the major things that they mentioned, I thought they were going to say, we're worried about people swimming in the rivers and things, but they actually said we're concerned that there's not enough bathrooms in the area. So we actually wrote that into the case, because without proper bathrooms along hiking trails and things, people find alternatives, and that has as much damage, if not more, on the water in the area as people swimming in the rivers and things. The Salt Lake Public Utilities, in their role, is aware that they can shut down the canyon if they need to, and so that tends to be their BATNA if they need to use that. And they align pretty closely with Alta Ski Lifts in that they want the Albion Basin Road shut down completely. So Friends of Alta is a nonprofit. They are residents and regular visitors of the Albion Basin area, and their goal is to provide access to the area, preserve the area, and educate people who are coming to be more responsible about their use of the area. Now, the Friends of Alta, their major endeavors at the moment is to actually purchase large blocks of land in the Albion Basin to preserve the area. However, they also are care a lot about making sure that people can still get access to the area and get access quite easily. So they help fund, they give a donation every year to the town of Alta to help fund the shuttle that runs up and down the road. They also pay for an information booth that they fund with the town of Alta to provide information about the conditions in the Albion Basin, to help people understand the delicate nature and balance of the area, and to encourage them to stay on trails and only go places that are marked as appropriate to venture into. And they also, the information booth also will tell people when there are no more parking spots available on the road, which sounds kind of silly, but it's a key for ensuring that not too many people are in the area. Now, the Friends of Alta, their main priority outside of purchasing land to preserve is to have an educational center that's more permanent than the information booth, and that offers classes that people can come and learn about the area and the natural vegetation in the area, the animals that live there, but also to offer information about how people can responsibly visit the area. So in the role, even though they seem to be a good source of funding, they're told explicitly that they will not fund anything until the rest of the group agrees to some kind of educational center. So even though they're not limited in terms of how much they can fund, they're limited in terms of what they can fund before this educational center. Now, the residents are those who live in the Albion Basin. So as Harris mentioned, there's actually two groups of residents who have pretty different priorities, but to maintain simplicity for the exercise, we've combined those into one role. These residents don't live in, well, they live in the town of Alta, but they live kind of above where the main group of residents live in the town of Alta. And they're the only ones who really need access to this road on a regular basis. Now, the interesting thing about the residents is that currently the road closes towards the end of October because it's already starting to snow, or it will snow in the next few weeks in the area. Now, the interesting thing is that once that road closes, and especially once the ski resort is open and in full operation, residents have to take either a snowmobile or a snowcat to their homes. So they already have very limited access to their homes in the winter. When the road is open, they have free access back and forth to their homes. But they're always concerned that access in the summer is going to be reduced, and eventually they'll have to hike to their home or use a four-wheeler or something like that. So they really are concerned about losing the limited access that they have now. They're also really bothered by the number of visitors in the area. Some of the homes are located quite close to the road, so because of the number of people driving up and down the roads, they get dust in their homes a lot. They can't be outside. And then because people are very interested in seeing the rare home here and there up in the area. They tend to want to be more curious and get a little too close to the homes, which bothers the residents as well. Now this is an issue that only the town of Alta is aware of, and that issue is that the residents believe that the Albion Basin Road actually belongs to the town of Alta, and they want the town of Alta to own the road because they feel like that will give them more say in the access that they have to the road and that other people have to the road as well. Now, the town of Alta is aware of the preference of the residents, and they do not want to own the road. They want the U.S. Forest Service to continue to own the road. But other than that, no other role in the negotiation is aware of this issue. It's an interesting issue to bring up because sometimes the residents will put this as one of their top priorities, and yet it will never get brought up in the negotiation. And so they just assume that they got what they want. Well, what they want is not the status quo, and they're told explicitly that whatever they don't negotiate will continue to be just as it was before. And so the residents make assumptions about things that they don't bring. They tend to be the party that makes assumptions about things that are not brought up in making their outcome seem more favorable. So that's just kind of an interesting thing to note that's sometimes interesting to bring up in the debrief. Now, this role can actually be taken out of the negotiation if it's necessary. So if you have a class that is a multiple of 7, then that's great. You can have all 7 roles. You can also have take this or the next role, which is the Wasatch Mountain Club, out of the negotiation if your class is a multiple of 6 or a multiple of 5, and that's more convenient for you. So this is a party that brings some interesting elements to the negotiation, but is not a crucial party to have in the negotiation. And finally, we have the Wasatch Mountain Club, which is they basically represent all the visitors that come to the Albion Basin. And they're really the ones causing the overpopulation problems, and they want no limited access. They want free access because this is one of the canyons in Utah that it's one of the last ones that actually has free access in the area. The Wasatch Mountain Club is aware in their role materials that they can go to their local legislator and really fight any attempts to limit their access in the area. So at first they may seem like a not very powerful party, but actually they have quite a good BATNA, and so they tend to be make an interesting twist in the negotiation. But this role again can be taken out of the negotiation if it's convenient. Beyond taking out these 2 roles, what we might suggest is if you need to double up people before you take out additional roles in the negotiation. So have 2 people be the U.S. Forest Service, or be a couple of different roles in the negotiation. Just because the other 5 roles, really without them, you tend to get roles being biased towards one outcome or the other. Okay, so I just want to quickly go over the different stages of the Albion Basin and to give you a better idea of the structure. So the first negotiation is a within-group negotiation in which all the people who are of the same role in class are asked to negotiate together. And essentially what this negotiation consists of is all the negotiators have to come together, understand the role, and decide what issues and preferences within those issues are important to them. Essentially, what they do, and this is where the scoring rubric deliverable comes in, is they have to create a scoring rubric that will quantify their issues and preferences. And how they do that is they divide 100 points among the issues that they decide are important to the group. And then they pick points, or they identify the preferences within each issue, and they give the highest preference the number of points that the issue receives. So that's the maximum number of points they can receive on that issue. And they give their least preferred preference a score of 0. They additionally have to identify what the current status quo is, so what's going on now, and they have to give that preference a point value as well, which will give them which will help them quantify their BATNA and give them a reservation point to work from. Now, it's recommended that this take about 2 hours, primarily, especially if you give out the roles and then have them start this negotiation immediately. The materials and understanding all the issues well enough to quantify all the issues in the exercise for their role can be quite complex, and so they actually need a lot of time. Typically, even after the 2 hours is given, when I've run this in negotiations classes, people will tend to follow up with each other, after class and things like that. So it can take some time to really hash this out. Additionally, I've had other faculty members that have used this exercise just have it be completely out of class, an exercise that's done out of class, so the groups have to get together sometime during the week, or they're given a half hour to kind of understand the basic issues, and then the rest of the scoring rubric is up to them to do outside of class. So it's this negotiation is quite flexible, although I would recommend just a few minutes, give students a few minutes to at least understand the issues and to understand who's in their group, and then work from there. So this is included in the teaching notes to help you help the students understand the scoring rubric. This should not be the biggest challenge in the negotiation, but I basically give the example of county sheriff. In the dark blue, you can see that the 3 issues that they've identified as political clout, public safety, and maintenance costs. The 100 points have been divided up among those 3 issues, and then the most preferred outcome in each of those issues is given the same point value as the issue itself. And then I've just given examples of, the different preferences that people might have. Those can be ordered and then valued, as you can see here. The least preferred is in that bottom row, and across that row, all those preferences have been given a point value of 0. So then you can easily see what the most preferred outcome is. It would be the outcome that gives you 100 points. You can see the least preferred outcome, which would be an outcome of 0 points. And then you can also identify and quantify the status quo. So this is kind of the idea of what participants or what students should be putting together for their deliverable on the scoring rubric. In the second stage, it's more of a traditional negotiation where each member of the negotiation has a different role, what we would call an across group negotiation. All 7 roles, or as I mentioned, the 6 or 5 roles can be here in this negotiation. So this negotiation really focuses on whether or not the road should be opened or closed, or how restricted access can be. And as you read the roles, you'll really start to understand, even though right now, as I'm saying this, it sounds like a very distributive negotiation. It's actually very integrative, because the U.S. Forest Service has been told explicitly that they cannot close the road. So it really becomes more of an issue of how much should we limit access, and what are the alternatives we should provide if we do limit that access. So it actually can be quite an integrative negotiation. This negotiation also, we would recommend that it be done over 2 hours, just because with 7 parties and with coming up with your own issues, which all parties may or may not be aware of, it does take time for the groups to reach an outcome. Groups that reach outcomes fast typically do not fully understand all of the issues involved in the negotiation, or they have used those additional materials to, before the negotiation, really understand a potential solution that might be beneficial to everyone. So you can kind of see those 2 patterns in your classes. So I'm just quickly going to go over a couple of debriefing opportunities. Let me just go back here. What I would recommend is that you debrief both stages of the negotiation, both the within group and the within and the across group negotiation together. And I would suggest that you give 1 to 2 hours of debriefing time for both stages of this negotiation. It's a little bit tricky, because you will have the within group negotiation occur first, and you won't know what issues are being scored or what everyone perceives as the important issues in the negotiation until you receive those scoring rubrics from each group. So you may also want 2 hours for the across group negotiation so that you can prepare your debrief, because that could potentially be the first time you're seeing the different issues that groups are highlighting. So like other scoreable exercises, you can actually create a scoring matrix. Here's, I just provided 2 examples of scoring matrices. Here you see all the roles in the rows, and then you see across the different groups assigned in the class. And you can create an average score for the role, which you see along the right-hand side. And you can create you can create an average score for the group, which you can't see here. If you'll notice here, this is just a made-up matrix, but this is not atypical of what you typically see. Most individuals feel like they did pretty well in the negotiation, and they'll score themselves high, which offers an opportunity for debriefing about being realistic about the outcome that you get. So it's not just a high score that matters, but are you really happy with the negotiation? And if people want to use this process for real negotiations, they really have to understand when you quantify something, what really does that mean? And are you really happy with your negotiation if you get even a score of 80? So that can be an opportunity for further discussion. This is another way to set up the scoring matrix. So you can have each group's scores, and you can identify the issues that group talked about, or you can identify themes that are consistent across every role, and you can then show each individual's score on each issue related to that group. So that's just another potential way to use a scoring rubric for class discussion in a debriefing session. There's several topics that are suggested in the teaching notes that can be useful in talking about with this negotiation. Let me just briefly go over some of those, and then I want to give plenty of time to answer any questions that you have. So because of the within group negotiation that occurs in stage 1, this actually offers a great opportunity to talk about negotiations in which everyone seems to agree. So the people within every group actually all have the exact same materials that they're reading from and learning about their role. And yet this negotiation often tends to be the more difficult negotiation of the 2 stages. And so it's interesting to reflect on that and talk about the challenges that occur when you assume that everyone's thinking about things like you are. So when you assume that everyone's on the same page, and the challenges that can occur in a negotiation, and particularly here, this goes into how important it is to prepare and during that preparation to actually communicate with the parties that are in your group and that you'll be representing. Additionally, if you think about the within group negotiation and then move to the across group negotiation, every person in the role is actually acting as an agent for their group and representing the issues and preferences that they felt were valuable. So this can be an excellent opportunity to talk about negotiating as an agent of a group and the limitations that are associated with that. So they have the scoring rubric that their group agreed on, and oftentimes in the negotiation, issues will come up that are not included on the role's scoring rubric. So how do they handle that? Do they hurry and create a new scoring rubric and make adjustments, or do they stay consistent with the scoring rubric that everyone agreed on? What are the challenges? There's unique challenges associated with negotiating as an agent, which can be discussed here. Understanding the value of preferences. So as I mentioned, a lot of people, most of the students will score themselves pretty high on the negotiation. And that's great for class because they get high points and they're happy about it. But asking the question of whether students really are satisfied with the outcome of the negotiation and how that's reflected in their score out of 100 really gets them thinking about, well, if I quantify my preferences and issues in a negotiation, what does that mean? And how can that actually help me in a negotiation rather than, oh, it just makes me feel good because I have a high score, which can sometimes happen once they get used to, a scoreable negotiation and in class exercises. And finally, of course, with the multiple parties, this can be used to talk about multi-party negotiations. In both stage 1 and stage 2 of the negotiation, there tends to be 5 to 7 people in the negotiation. You can talk about challenges associated with getting multiple parties to agree, the importance of decision rules. Particularly with stage 1, it's very much like a team negotiation or a department negotiation. So how does a group like that's kind of all on the same page make a decision, and how do those decision rules affect how well they get along or the amount of conflict in the group as they negotiate. And of course, as with multi-party negotiations, this emphasizes some of the unique challenges that negotiators face when they're working with more than, or negotiating with more than just one other person. So those things can be emphasized. And I think related to that, talking about power and coalitions within a multi-party negotiation is an interesting topic to discuss. And there's several powerful parties in this negotiation: Alta Ski Lifts, the Forest Service, the Public Utilities, and the Town of Alta. They together have opportunities to form coalitions, which give them additional power. But there's also opportunities, for example, the Town of Alta and the Friends of Alta can form a coalition, which gives the Friends of Alta, which is kind of a low power party, more power through the power that the Town of Alta has. So there's some unique opportunities to talk more about and think more about, power in terms of creating coalitions and within a negotiation. So I apologize for moving through those debriefing topics a little quickly. I wanted to provide some time for questions. If any of you have questions for me in terms of the structure of the negotiation, or Harris in terms of what's actually going on. Harris has actually taught this a lot in several different types of negotiations classes. So he could answer any questions about his experiences there as well. We'd be happy to do that at this point.
I also will point out that we are creating a version of this exercise that will provide that assumes that stage 1 essentially is finished, so that you get a scoreable exercise that would be analogous to Harbico or something like that, where you have the preferences up front, so that there's just essentially a stage 2 negotiation, which would be simpler to use than this one.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, Harris. Very soon we should have that completed, and it'll offer the multi-party nature of the negotiation here without the stage 1 essentially negotiation. So students won't have to create a scoring sheet, and those kind of issues won't be the focus of the negotiation.
I will add that in my advanced negotiation course, I built the course around giving 2 sessions or a session and a half of my executive MBA course to this exercise, so that we could explore the issues of preference identification and creation. And McKenzie and I think that aspect of this version of the negotiation is really quite valuable as a teaching tool. That's been our experience. So, go ahead, McKenzie.
Go ahead, Harris.
So Jean is asking how much time to negotiate and debrief the short form. That won't reduce the time in the second negotiation very much, but it will turn the negotiation into in the context of my 4-hour EMBA sessions, I would be able to do the stage 2 negotiation and debrief it in less than the full 4-hour session. It would leave some time over for something else. So I would think that you could, especially if they had the rules ahead of time, or at least their general instructions ahead of time, you could certainly, I think, negotiate and debrief this in, 3 to under 4 hours, certainly 3 to 3.5 hours, I would say. Whereas the way it's done now with this longer form, we give them a couple hours for stage 1 and a couple hours for stage 2.
So Jean is asking what happens when participants are in the stage 2 negotiation. They haven't recognized maybe some of the preferences or issues even that other parties have. How do they handle that when it's not on their scoring rubric? Does it reduce their points? Could it have increased their points? So what I would say to this is it's not going to reduce their points. So essentially, you can think of this issue that they've just learned about as a 0-point issue. Obviously, they didn't care about it enough, or their role doesn't care about it enough to really bring it up or highlight it. Admittedly, they do have some information through the additional materials that can offer them better insight into what other parties' preferences are, but they don't have, of course, exactly the perfect information about that. So essentially, what I've seen in teaching this negotiation is that it doesn't reduce or increase someone's score if they don't want it to. Now, some people have tried to change their scoring rubric so that it makes them look more favorable. And they say, oh yeah, well, I added 10 points for the road being completely closed, or for the road ownership being changed over to the town of Alta. And everyone in the debriefing says, well, you can't do that, we didn't agree on it. So I think it more brings up an interesting point of discussion rather than actually affecting the negotiated outcomes. And then it also catches students by surprise, and so sometimes it brings up a little point of frustration, but typically it does offer a good learning opportunity in the debriefing.
And I'll connect that with Anne Sophie's question about this. Do the students in stage 2 the participants really think of themselves as agents of the group that they were part of in stage 1? In a context like McKenzie was just describing, that Jean was asking about, I think they do feel the tension to actually represent the outcome of the stage 1 negotiation. We think of that as more as a way of making an analogy to a within team negotiation before you go to negotiate, for example, in a real organizational context, because obviously they are not really a team. But they're acting together to understand their role. So it gives you an opportunity to raise the issue of being an agent of a team, but it's really analogous to it.
Yeah, and I would add to that, if you want to emphasize that aspect of the negotiation, you can really emphasize the team nature, and you can even, if you want, give participants, emphasize that they really shouldn't be changing their scoring rubric once they make a decision. I think if you don't really want to play that up, then they can. It's not as big of an issue, and they can change it or do whatever.
It depends a little how you frame the deliverable. Is that a contract or just input to their individual next stage? Both McKenzie and I would be happy to answer questions if you email us, and we do have the debriefing notes as part of the exercise, of course. And as McKenzie said, there is a document that explains what happened since we were compiling the case, and since we did the interviews for developing the case. we can add to that as time goes on, or as long as I am in Alta, I'll know what the next steps are. So as time goes on, I'm happy to update that or communicate individually with anybody who's using the exercise. If you want to know about the real world, which of course isn't really to the point of the exercise, but especially here at the University of Utah, my students who all know this area and all hiked in it are very interested in the what's happening to the latest version of what's happening.
Well, it looks like we have one last question by Anne-Sophie, but if you guys want to put in your email addresses in the chat box, that way Anne-Sophie can email you both directly the question that she's got, and we can close out the recording.
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Okay, great, thanks. And I want to thank you both again for presenting for us today. The webinar should be up on negotiationexercises.com within the next few weeks.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.